This is filthy. Are you blind? Amanda, the janitorial supervisor, snapped aggressively at Marcus, the new black janitor. Marcus glanced at the freshly polished glass. I just cleaned it, he said calmly. She grabbed a full cup of coffee and hurled it across the table. The dark liquid splattered, dripping onto the floor. Amanda crossed her arms, glaring at Marcus. Now clean it again. As we delve into this story, if you believe everyone deserves respect, regardless of their background, hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from. It was early morning at Kingsley Enterprises, a multi-million-dollar company known for its success in real estate investments and high-end business operations. The office building towered over the city skyline, bustling with employees in sharp suits, carrying expensive briefcases and sipping overpriced coffee, exuding an air of importance. A lone motorcycle pulled up to the glass doors, its engine cutting through the polished silence of the corporate world. Marcus Jones, 24, stepped off the bike, dressed in a simple hoodie, dark jeans, and a worn backpack slung over his shoulder. To the world, he looked like nothing special. But what nobody knew was that he wasn't just some random visitor. He was the firstborn son of the company's billionaire owner, the rightful heir to the empire, and soon-to-be CEO. But today, he wasn't walking in as the boss. He walked in as a nobody. For years, Marcus had been living abroad, expanding his knowledge and growing into the man his late black mother would have been proud of. His father, Robert Kingsley, a white man, had remarried, and the company continued under his leadership. But Marcus had heard things. Rumors of discrimination, reports of unfair promotions, whispers that minorities were treated like second-class citizens in his father's empire. And today, he was here to see it for himself. As he approached the entrance, adjusting his backpack, he immediately felt eyes on him. Employees in designer suits looked at him with confusion. Two receptionists, both well-dressed in corporate attire, exchanged glances. Then there was Kevin Michaels. Kevin was a senior operations manager, tall, stocky, with slicked-back hair and an air of self-importance. He prided himself on maintaining the company's high standards, which in his mind meant ensuring only people who fit the image belonged. And to Kevin, Marcus did not fit that image. For you, a free like is easy, but for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. As Marcus reached the glass doors, Kevin gave him a long, disapproving look. Then, with a smirk creeping onto his lips, he stepped forward. Hey, deliveries go to the back. Marcus paused. There it was, the first sign. He slowly turned, meeting Kevin's smug expression, and let the words sink in. Now tell me, have you ever walked into a place and, before you could even introduce yourself, people already assumed you didn't belong? Drop a comment if you've experienced something like this. Subscribe and like this video for more stories like this. Marcus could have revealed his identity right then, but not yet. Instead, he smiled a slow, knowing smile. Actually, he said casually, adjusting his backpack, I'm not here for a delivery. I was wondering if there were any job openings here. I'm in dire need of a job. Kevin raised an eyebrow, looking Marcus up and down like he was something stuck to the bottom of his expensive shoes. The other employees chuckled. A few even whispered to each other, as if the idea of this casually dressed black man working inside Kingsley Enterprises was some kind of joke. Kevin folded his arms. A job? He snorted. You want to work here? Marcus nodded, keeping his expression neutral. Yeah, I'm looking for an opportunity. Kevin let out a mocking laugh. Well, I don't think we're hiring, he said, turning away dismissively, assuming the conversation was over. But Marcus didn't move. Are you sure? He pressed. I'll take anything, any available position at this point. Kevin, now clearly annoyed, gestured toward a nearby receptionist. Hey, check the system. See if there's something suitable for him. The receptionist, barely hiding a smirk, typed into her computer. After a few moments, she looked up and grinned. Well, there is one position available, she said, glancing at Kevin. Kevin smirked back. Oh yeah? What is it? The receptionist let out a small, condescending chuckle. The janitorial team is hiring. For a moment, the air was thick with silent amusement. Kevin turned back to Marcus, his smirk widening. So what do you say? You wanted an opportunity, right? Marcus tilted his head slightly as if considering. He could feel the weight of the moment, their stares, their quiet laughter, their assumption that he was desperate. And in that moment, he made his choice. With a calm nod, he smiled. I'll take it. Kevin blinked. What? Marcus repeated himself, louder this time. I'll take it. Kevin burst out laughing. You're serious? The other employees watched, shaking their heads, amused that this man had actually accepted a janitor job. Yet Marcus didn't flinch. He just smiled, because they had no idea what they had just done. They had just given the next CEO of Kingsley Enterprises a front-row seat to see exactly how deep their discrimination ran. They had no idea who they were talking to, and soon enough, they were about to find out, because things were about to get very, very interesting. You would think that after securing a job, things would start getting better. But for Marcus Jones, 24, the real test was only beginning. Imagine stepping into a place where everyone assumes you are beneath them. Imagine working in an environment where every word, every glance, and every breath is a reminder that you are unwelcome. Have you ever had a job where someone treated you unfairly just because of who you are? Drop a comment if you've ever been in that situation, because what happens next in this story? Oh, it's the kind of injustice that will make your blood boil. And if you're already hooked, smash that subscribe and like button, because you won't believe what happened next. So there he was, Marcus Jones, the secret heir to Kingsley Enterprises, standing in a janitor's uniform, holding a mop and bucket. He had been working for less than an hour when it became clear he was not welcome here. The floors of the building gleamed under expensive chandeliers, polished by generations of workers who had walked these halls before him. But none of them, not a single one, had ever been the CEO in disguise. Yet no one in the building saw him as anything more than a janitor, and no one made that more clear than his new supervisor. Her name was Amanda Whitmore, blonde, tall, a sharp, permanent scowl etched into her face. Amanda had worked at Kingsley Enterprises for years, and she was proud of her position, too proud. Because in her mind, she had power over the workers beneath her. And to Marcus, she made it clear from day one that she believed he belonged at the bottom. It started immediately. You! Amanda's sharp voice echoed through the hallway. Marcus, mop in hand, turned to see her marching toward him with a glare. What do you think you're doing? She snapped. Marcus glanced down at the mop, then back up at her. Mopping? Amanda sneered. Don't get smart with me. I don't like your kind thinking you can act all high and mighty around here. My kind? Marcus just smiled, because he wanted to see how deep this woman's disrespect ran. And oh, it ran deep. Amanda didn't just dislike Marcus, she hated him, and she showed it every single chance she got. If he mopped a hallway, it wasn't good enough. If he wiped down a desk, it was streaky. If he emptied a trash bin, he was too slow. It didn't matter what he did, Amanda found something to complain about, and she didn't just correct him, she humiliated him loudly in front of everyone. Are you stupid? She sneered one afternoon as Marcus finished cleaning the executive lounge. Marcus, calm as ever, set down his rag. Did I do something wrong? Amanda rolled her eyes dramatically, turning to a few employees nearby who were already staring. Did you do something wrong? She mocked, laughing. Oh, I don't know. Maybe the fact that you're still standing here after mopping like you're a 5-year-old. The employees chuckled under their breath. Marcus took in every single face. He didn't react, didn't flinch, because while they were laughing at him now, soon they would regret every second of it. And just when he thought it couldn't get worse, Kevin entered the picture. That's right, Kevin Michaels, the same racist manager who had mocked him on his first day. Kevin, who still had no idea that the man he belittled was about to own his entire future. Kevin walked into the hallway where Marcus was scrubbing the floors on his knees. Well, 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 Kevin sneered, crossing his arms. Look at you. Guess we found the perfect place for you, huh? Marcus exhaled slowly. Not yet. He wouldn't reveal himself yet. This was about to get so much better. Kevin made it his personal mission to keep making Marcus's life hell. He walked through the halls, dropping trash on the floor right after Marcus had cleaned. He spilled coffee on purpose and demanded Marcus clean it up. He called him boy every chance he got. And worst of all, he did it all in front of other employees. Some of them laughed, some of them stayed silent, and a few watched Marcus carefully because they saw something. Something about him didn't add up. His posture, too confident, his presence, too calm, too controlled, and the way he looked at people, it was almost like he was studying them. But still, the abuse continued, until one day Amanda, that vicious supervisor, took it too far. Marcus had just finished cleaning the executive conference room when Amanda stormed in. "What is this?" she snapped, pointing at the perfectly clean table. Marcus blinked. "It's the table," Amanda scoffed loudly. "This is filthy. Are you blind?" Marcus glanced at the polished glass. Amanda's lips curled into a sneer. "You missed a spot." Then, without hesitation, she picked up a full cup of coffee and threw it across the table. The dark liquid splattered across the glass, dripping onto the floor. Amanda crossed her arms, staring Marcus down. "Now, clean it again." Silence. The room went dead silent. Everyone who had been walking by froze, their eyes widening in shock. Marcus inhaled slowly, and he smiled. Now the real show was about to begin, because what Amanda and Kevin didn't know was that their entire world was about to crumble. Marcus Jones, 24, had been playing the long game. He had been mocked, humiliated, treated like dirt. They thought he was just a janitor. They thought he was beneath them. But what they didn't know was that he was about to become their new boss. And when his father, Robert Kingsley, the powerful white CEO of the company, arrived, every assumption, every judgment, every ounce of arrogance in that building was about to be shattered. The receptionist's phone rang sharply, cutting through the noise of the office. She answered quickly, her voice professional, until her expression changed, a look of shock, then panic. Because the person on the other end was Robert Kingsley himself, the owner, the billionaire, the man whose name was on every single document in this company, and he was on his way right now. Words spread through the building like wildfire. Executives straightened their ties, secretaries rushed to organize paperwork, employees whispered excitedly. The big boss was coming in. But no one, not a single person, was more excited than Kevin Michaels, because he felt his opportunity had arrived. In Kevin's mind, this was his chance to impress the boss. Oh, he could already see it, shaking hands with Robert Kingsley, talking about company growth, maybe even getting a promotion. And the janitor? Kevin didn't even think about Marcus anymore. To him, Marcus was just a background character in his perfect little corporate world. But he was about to learn a lesson he would never forget. Then it happened. The elevator doors dinged, and the room fell silent. Robert Kingsley had arrived. A tall, commanding man in a sleek grey suit stepped out, his face sharp with authority. His presence alone commanded respect. Behind him, his assistants, bodyguards, and senior executives walked with precision, and as he stepped forward, every single person in the room stood a little straighter. Kevin puffed out his chest. Amanda, the racist supervisor, adjusted her blouse, already imagining herself getting in good graces with the boss. Employees whispered excitedly. This was the man they had all been waiting for. Robert walked to the center of the floor, turned slowly and smiled, and then he said the words that changed everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," Robert began, his voice smooth yet powerful, "today is a very special day for this company. People held their breath. Kevin leaned forward slightly, eager. Amanda clasped her hands together, eyes shining with excitement. Robert continued, "For years I have built Kingsley Enterprises with the hope of leaving behind a legacy, a company that stands for greatness, success, and, most importantly," he paused, glancing around the room, "integrity." A few people shifted awkwardly at that word. Then Robert smiled again. "And today, I am proud to announce that my firstborn son is officially here in the building." Silence. A wave of confusion swept through the room. Firstborn son? People glanced at each other. His son, the new CEO? Kevin's heart started racing because he had never seen Ron before, and neither had anyone else. The whispers started. "Wait, has anyone met his son? I thought he had a younger son from his second wife. Who is it?" Kevin's mind was racing. If Robert's son was the new CEO, that meant he had been in the office already. But where? His eyes darted around the room, and then, in his mind, it clicked. Of course, the only explanation was that it had to be one of the executives. Maybe one of the young white men in tailored suits standing quietly in the back. Maybe the well-dressed guy from the finance department. Kevin smirked. This was perfect. A wealthy white guy as the new CEO. That was exactly how things should be. Amanda, standing beside him, gave him a little nod of agreement. They had nothing to worry about. But then Robert spoke again, and this time the words shook the entire room. "My son is already here," Robert said proudly. "Marcus, come here." Time stopped. Every single pair of eyes turned, searching. Kevin turned his head. Amanda's confident smirk froze on her lips, because they saw him standing there, still in his janitor uniform, still holding his mop, still standing right where they had left him. Marcus. Silence, complete, utter silence. And then Kevin's face drained of color. Amanda gasped sharply, her hand flying to her chest. Employees whispered in shock. Because the man they had ignored, the man they had mocked, the man they had treated like trash was their new CEO. It was at that moment Kevin knew he had just made the biggest mistake of his life today. Today, in this office, in front of every single employee, Kevin Michaels and Amanda Whitmore were about to face the consequences of their actions. They had spent days mocking Marcus Jones, 24, laughing at him, treating him like he was less than human. Never in their wildest dreams did they think the man they humiliated was the one who held their future in his hands. But now that truth was standing right in front of them. For a moment, just a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. The air in the office was so thick with tension you could almost hear hearts racing. Kevin, standing near the center of the room, stared blankly at Marcus, his mouth open slightly, but no words came out. Amanda, standing just a few feet away, felt her stomach drop. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. Because it didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. Marcus the janitor? No, that wasn't possible. They had spent the last few days belittling this man. They had made him clean their messes, spilled drinks just so he would have to mop them up. Amanda had even thrown coffee across the table and made him clean it right in front of everyone. And now they were being told that this same man was the CEO of Kingsley Enterprises? No, it had to be a joke, a sick, twisted joke, but it wasn't. Marcus stepped forward, his posture perfect, his face calm, but his eyes... Oh, his eyes were sharp, focused, because today he was done playing games. He looked around the room, watching as whispers erupted like wildfire. "Wait, is this real? That's the new CEO? But he's been a janitor this whole time." Marcus's gaze swept over each and every one of them, as if silently memorizing their faces. And then, finally, he spoke. "I assume you all have a lot of questions," Marcus said, his voice smooth, steady, and filled with authority. The room was dead silent. Kevin, still frozen in place, blinked rapidly, his mind scrambling for something, anything to say. Amanda looked like she wanted to disappear. Marcus let the silence hang in the air for a few seconds, and then he turned to his father, Robert, standing beside him with his hands behind his back, watching with quiet approval. Marcus nodded slightly. His father nodded back. And just like that, the room belonged to him. "My name is Marcus Jones Kingsley." His voice carried through the office like a wave, commanding everyone's attention. "I am the firstborn son of Robert Kingsley, and as of today, I am your new CEO." Boom! Just like that, the truth had been spoken, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop him. Kevin's entire body stiffened. Amanda let out a strangled gasp. Employees exchanged stunned glances. Someone in the back let out a low whistle, as if they couldn't believe what they had just heard. Marcus stood tall, unshaken, unbothered, untouchable, because for the first time since walking through those doors, everyone was seeing him for who he truly was. "For the past few days," Marcus continued, pacing slowly through the room, "I have worked in this building as a janitor." Murmurs of shock and disbelief filled the atmosphere. "I wanted to see how this company, my company, treats people when they think no one is watching." His eyes landed directly on Kevin. Kevin gulped. "And what I saw," Marcus continued, his voice dropping slightly, "was not only disappointing, but disgusting. Kevin Michaels." Kevin flinched, his breathing quickened. Marcus took a step toward him. "You assumed I was a nobody. You mocked me, laughed in my face, and you did it so confidently because you thought you were untouchable." Kevin's hands started shaking. He tried to speak, tried to salvage what little dignity he had left, but before he could, Marcus raised a hand. Kevin's mouth snapped shut. Then Marcus turned his head and looked at Amanda. Amanda's face was bright red, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape, for a lifeline, for anything. She found nothing. Marcus tilted his head. "And you," he said softly. Amanda sucked in a breath. "You threw coffee across a table and made me clean it." She squeezed her eyes shut. Marcus let the weight of his words sink in. Then he spoke one last time. "Let me ask you something." The room held its breath. "If you had known who I was from the start, would you have treated me differently?" Silence. A long, painful silence. And then Amanda nodded slowly. Marcus smiled. Because now the power was in his hands. For a moment, just a brief, agonizing moment, Kevin thought, hoped, that maybe this was all a dream, a nightmare. Because this couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. He had spent days belittling Marcus Jones, treating him like nothing. And now, standing before him, wearing the same janitor uniform they had mocked him in, was a man who could end his entire career with a single word. Marcus turned slowly, scanning the room. His eyes landed on each and every employee, memorizing their faces. Some of them had stood by and watched. Some of them had laughed along. But one or two had shown kindness, and that would not be forgotten, because Marcus had been watching everything. Marcus's gaze locked onto Kevin, and finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus spoke. "Kevin Michaels." The words cut through the silence like a blade. Kevin flinched, his hands clenched at his sides, his entire body stiff with fear, because he knew what was coming, but still he had to try. "Sir," Kevin stammered, forcing a shaky smile onto his face, I had no idea." Marcus raised a single hand. Kevin's mouth snapped shut. "Because the thing about power is you know when you've lost it, and Kevin had just lost everything." Marcus took a step forward. "Let me ask you something, Kevin," he said, his voice smooth, calm, deadly. Kevin swallowed hard. Marcus tilted his head slightly. "If you had known who I was," he continued, "would you have treated me the way you did?" Kevin froze. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He had no answer, because they both knew the truth. Kevin lowered his head. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't know." Marcus smirked. "I know," he said simply. That was the entire point. Because Kevin hadn't been cruel because he was having a bad day. He hadn't been disrespectful because he was stressed. No. Kevin had belittled Marcus because he thought he was beneath him, and that was something Marcus would never forget or forgive. Then Marcus's eyes moved to Amanda. She had been standing frozen. her hands gripping the edge of her dress like it was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. And now those terrified eyes were locked onto his. Amanda tried to smile. "Sir, I was just following company policy," she blurted out. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Company policy?" Amanda nodded quickly, desperate. Yes, sir. I was just..." Marcus cut her off. Throwing coffee across a table? Amanda's face turned ghostly pale. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because there was no excuse. Marcus let the moment sit, let the weight of their actions crush them. Then he turned to his father. Robert Kingsley had been watching this entire thing unfold without a single word. His expression was unreadable, and for the first time in his entire career, Robert Kingsley was ashamed. Ashamed of what his company had become. Ashamed of the employees he had trusted. Ashamed that his own son had been treated like this by the people who were supposed to represent his business, and now he was about to set things right. Robert stepped forward. He looked at Kevin, then at Amanda, then at Marcus. Finally, he addressed Marcus. "Marcus," Robert said slowly, "what do you think should be done?" Kevin visibly trembled. Amanda clutched her hands together, pleading silently, and Marcus did not hesitate. "Fire them." Robert nodded. "Kevin Michaels," he said, his voice calm but final, "your employment in this company is terminated immediately." Kevin's knees nearly buckled. "No," he choked. "No, sir, please." Robert ignored him. He turned to Amanda. "Amanda Whitmore, your position as supervisor is revoked. You are no longer employed here." Amanda let out a silent scream. She spun to Marcus, her eyes wide, desperate. "Sir, please, I didn't mean..." Marcus held up his hand. Amanda's words died in her throat. And just like that, it was done. Kevin and Amanda had spent days humiliating a man. Now, they were the ones with nothing left. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned to the employees, and then he smiled. "Not all of you stayed silent," he said, and at that moment one employee stepped forward. It was Linda, the one person who had stood up for Marcus when no one else did. Now she was about to be rewarded. Marcus turned to his father. "My first decision as CEO," he said, "is to promote Linda, effective immediately." Gasps of shock filled the room. Linda's eyes filled with tears, and just like that, balance had been restored. For days, Marcus Jones had watched the way they treated him, watched how they laughed, watched as they stripped him of dignity, believing he had none to begin with. Now the truth had been revealed. Kevin Michaels, gone. Amanda Whitmore, disgraced. And the rest of the employees, they were about to hear the most important words of their lives. Because this wasn't just about one man's victory. This was about changing a system that allowed discrimination to exist in the first place. The silence in the room was deafening. The same employees who had once laughed, who had whispered behind Marcus's back, treating him like he was invisible, now they couldn't even look him in the eye. Marcus stood tall, still in his janitor's uniform, still with that same quiet, powerful presence. But now there was no one left to doubt who he was, because today he was their leader. Marcus took a step forward, then another. The weight of the moment settled over the room as he slowly scanned every single face. Then, finally, he spoke. Respect. One word, but it cut through the air like thunder. He let it sit there for a moment, let them feel it. Then he continued. Respect is not something that should be reserved for a select few. It is not something that should be dictated by race, by class, by the way a person dresses or the way they speak. Respect should be the foundation of everything we do, because without it, we become exactly what we witnessed this week. A few employees lowered their heads. The guilt was sinking in. I have walked these halls. I have been invisible to you. I have been ignored, belittled, insulted. He glanced toward the conference room table, the one Amanda had thrown coffee across. I have been forced to clean up messes that were created just to humiliate me. The weight of his words settled like bricks on their shoulders. He saw it, felt it, but still he wasn't done. And through all of it, a pause, every breath in the room was held. I have learned one thing. The people who tear others down. They do it because they are afraid. Marcus nodded. Afraid of change. Afraid of equality. Afraid of a world where power is not determined by privilege, but by integrity. The air crackled with electricity because he was right, and everyone in that room knew it. That ends today. You could hear a pin drop. Because these weren't just words. This was a promise. Marcus turned to his father, Robert Kingsley, the man who had built this company from the ground up, the man who had trusted others to run it, and the man who had just learned that some of those people had been running it into the ground. Robert Kingsley nodded once. He wasn't just looking at his son, he was looking at the future. Effective immediately, Marcus announced, this company will be implementing new policies to ensure that discrimination has no place in our offices. Shock rippled through the room. A few employees gasped, but none of them spoke against it. Because really, what could they say? Marcus continued, there will be accountability, there will be consequences, there will be change. Then, he did something that no one expected. He smiled. Because this moment, this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making people suffer. It was about building something better. This company will no longer be built on arrogance. It will be built on respect, on fairness, on the belief that we all rise when we lift each other up. And just like that, the entire company shifted. Because at that moment, they didn't just see Marcus as their CEO, they saw him as their leader. And for the first time, they knew this company was finally in the right hands. Marcus turned back to his father. Robert Kingsley took a breath, his chest rising with pride. Then he did something he had never done before. He stepped forward and shook his son's hand. A declaration, a public acknowledgement, an unspoken truth. This company belonged to Marcus Jones, and now it was time to rewrite history. That is how you change the world. Not with revenge, not with anger, but with power, real power. The kind that doesn't just break systems, it builds something better. Do you think Marcus made the right decision? Should he have been nicer, or did he handle it perfectly? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you love this story, click that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. See you in the next video.